Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. A team of medical professionals greeted him, their faces obscured by surgical masks. Among them stood a nurse with striking green eyes that caught his attention immediately. She offered a reassuring smile, visible even behind her mask, and he felt a flutter in his chest. "Welcome," said the lead doctor, a tall man with salt and pepper hair. "We're going to walk you through the procedures we'll be performing today. Please, have a seat." The agent settled into a comfortable chair, his eyes darting between the various machines and instruments surrounding him. He'd been briefed on what to expect, but the reality of it all was starting to sink in. "As you know, we'll be altering your appearance significantly," the doctor continued. "We'll start with a reconstructive surgery on your nose to change its shape and structure. This will be followed by targeted liposuction to refine your facial contours and body shape." The nurse with the green eyes stepped forward, holding a tablet. "We'll also be implementing a series of non-surgical treatments to further enhance the changes," she explained, her voice soft yet confident. "This includes dermal fillers, skin treatments, and possibly some work on your vocal cords to alter your speaking voice." The agent nodded, trying to process all the information. His gaze kept drifting back to the nurse, finding comfort in her steady presence. "There's one more thing we'd like to propose," the doctor said, his tone becoming more serious. "To achieve the most convincing disguise possible, we believe administering female hormones would be beneficial. This would give you a more feminine appearance overall, making it much harder for anyone to recognize you." The agent's eyebrows shot up in surprise. This wasn't something he'd been prepared for. "Female hormones?" he repeated, his voice wavering slightly. The nurse stepped closer, her green eyes locking with his. "It's a significant step," she admitted, "but it would dramatically increase the effectiveness of your disguise. The changes would be gradual and reversible if you choose to stop the treatment later." The agent's mind raced. He thought about the mission, the risks involved, and the importance of remaining undetected. After a moment of internal debate, he took a deep breath and nodded. "All right," he said, his voice firm with newfound resolve. "Let's do it. All of it." The medical team sprang into action, prepping equipment and reviewing charts. The nurse with the green eyes stayed by his side, explaining each step of the process in detail. Her presence was calming, and the agent found himself grateful for her support. As they prepared him for the first procedure, the agent closed his eyes, his thoughts drifting to the mission ahead. He knew that when he woke up, everything would be different. His appearance, his voice, perhaps even how he saw himself. It would all change. But he was ready. For the sake of the mission, for the greater good, he was willing to embrace this transformation. The anesthesia began to take effect, and the last thing the agent saw before drifting off was the nurse's green eyes, watching over him with a mix of professionalism and something that looked almost like admiration. Hours passed in a haze of surgical procedures and recovery periods. The agent drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of hushed voices and gentle hands tending to him. Each time he opened his eyes, he caught glimpses of the green-eyed nurse, her presence a constant throughout his transformation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the agent fully regained consciousness. He blinked, his vision slowly coming into focus. The room was dimly lit, the machines around him emitting a soft glow. He tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and sore. "Easy there," came a familiar voice. The nurse with the green eyes appeared at his bedside, holding a cup of water with a straw. "Small sips," she instructed, helping him drink. As the cool water soothed his throat, the agent became acutely aware of how different he felt. His body seemed lighter, softer somehow. He raised a hand to his face, fingers trembling as they traced the unfamiliar contours of his new features. "The surgeries were successful," the nurse explained, setting the cup aside. "You've been in and out for a few days while we monitored your recovery. How are you feeling?" The agent opened his mouth to respond, then paused, startled by the higher pitch of his voice.
I'm not sure,
he said, marveling at the softness of his new tone.
Everything feels different.
The nurse nodded sympathetically.
That's to be expected. Your body has undergone significant changes. It will take some time to adjust.
She reached for a hand mirror on the nearby table.
Would you like to see?
Heart pounding, the agent nodded. The nurse held up the mirror, and he found himself staring at a stranger. Delicate features gazed back at him, high cheekbones, full lips, and large, expressive eyes framed by long lashes. His once strong jawline had been softened, and his skin appeared smooth and radiant.
Is that
me? He whispered, hardly believing his eyes. The nurse smiled. It is. The hormone treatments have already begun to take effect, softening your features and altering your body composition.
You'll continue to see changes over the coming weeks and months.
The agent continued to stare at his reflection, a mix of emotions swirling within him. Part of him was in awe of the transformation, impressed by the skill of the medical team. Another part felt a twinge of loss for his former self. But overriding it all was a sense of determination. This was for the mission, he reminded himself. This new identity would keep him safe and allow him to complete his objectives. What happens now? He asked, finally lowering the mirror. Now, we begin your rehabilitation and training, the nurse explained.
You'll need to learn how to move and speak in your new body. We'll also start you on a regimen of exercises and treatments to further enhance the feminine aspects of your physique. The agent nodded, trying to process everything.
And the mission? Your handlers will brief you once you've completed the initial adjustment period, she assured him. For now, focus on recovery and adapting to your new identity. Over the next few weeks, the agent threw himself into his rehabilitation with the same dedication he'd applied to his previous training. He worked tirelessly to master the nuances of his new voice, practicing for hours to achieve a natural-sounding feminine tone. The physical therapy sessions were grueling, teaching him to move with a grace and fluidity that matched his new appearance. Throughout it all, the green-eyed nurse remained a constant presence. She guided him through exercises, offered encouragement during difficult moments, and provided a sympathetic ear when the weight of his transformation felt overwhelming. The agent found himself growing increasingly fond of her, appreciating her professionalism and compassion in equal measure. As the hormone treatments continued to work their magic, the agent watched his body change in ways he'd never imagined. The medical team had warned him about these changes, but experiencing them firsthand was surreal. One morning, about a month into his recovery, the agent stood before a full-length mirror, truly taking in his new appearance for the first time. He wore a simple outfit, jeans and a fitted t-shirt, but the effect was striking. The person staring back at him was undeniably female, with a petite frame and soft, feminine features. He ran a hand through his now longer hair, marveling at how natural it all looked. "Impressive, isn't it?" came a familiar voice. The agent turned to see the green-eyed nurse entering the room, a smile playing on her lips. "The transformation is nearly complete." The agent nodded, still a bit awestruck. "It's incredible. I hardly recognize myself." "That's the point," the nurse reminded him gently. "Your old identity is safely hidden beneath this new exterior. You're ready to begin the next phase of your training." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. The lead doctor entered, accompanied by a stern-looking woman in a crisp suit, one of the agent's handlers. "Good morning," the handler said, her eyes appraising the agent's new appearance. "I trust you're feeling well?" The agent nodded, instinctively straightening his posture. "Yes, ma'am. I'm ready to proceed with the mission." The handler's expression softened slightly. "Excellent. We'll begin briefing you on the details today. But first, there's the matter of your new identity to discuss." The agent listened intently as the handler outlined the backstory they'd created for his new persona. He would be assuming the role of a young woman named Emma Taylor, a recent college graduate starting a new job in a tech firm. The firm, of course, was a front for the agency's operations, allowing Emma to move freely in the circles necessary for the mission. As the briefing continued, the agent, now Emma, felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The mission ahead was complex and dangerous, requiring her to infiltrate a criminal organization suspected of selling state secrets. Her new identity would be crucial in getting close to key players without arousing suspicion. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Emma underwent intensive training, learning to fully inhabit her new persona. She practiced her cover story until it felt as natural as breathing, memorized details about her supposed past, and honed the skills she'd need for her role at the tech firm. Through it all, the green-eyed nurse, whose name, Emma learned, was Claire, remained a steadfast support. She helped Emma navigate the practical aspects of living as a woman, from makeup application to choosing appropriate clothing for various situations. As the day of her mission deployment approached, Emma found herself experiencing a complex mix of emotions. She was eager to put her training to use, to prove that all the changes she'd undergone were worth it. But there was also a lingering sense of uncertainty. Would she be able to pull this off? What if someone saw through her disguise? The night before she was set to leave, Emma stood on the balcony of her recovery room, gazing out at the city lights. She heard soft footsteps behind her and turned to see Claire approaching. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Claire asked, coming to stand beside her. Emma nodded, grateful for the nurse's perceptiveness. "A little," she admitted. "It's one thing to train in a controlled environment, but out there, everything's at stake." Claire placed a comforting hand on Emma's arm. "You're ready for this," she said firmly. "I've watched you transform not just physically, but mentally. You've embraced this new identity with a determination that's truly impressive." Emma felt a warmth spread through her at Claire's words and touch. Over the past weeks, she'd found herself increasingly drawn to the nurse, appreciating her kindness and strength. Now, standing close in the moonlight, Emma felt an undeniable attraction. "I couldn't have done it without you," Emma said softly, meeting Claire's gaze. "Your support has meant everything." For a moment, they stood in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. Then, slowly, Claire leaned in, hugging her. When they finally parted, both women were slightly breathless. Claire smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I've wanted to do that for a while," she admitted. "But I know you have to leave tomorrow." Emma nodded, her mind whirling. This unexpected connection complicated things, but it also gave her a renewed sense of purpose. "I'll come back," she promised. "When the mission is over, I'll find you." Claire squeezed her hand. "I'll be here. Just be careful out there, okay?" The next morning, Emma stood before the mirror one last time, checking her appearance. She wore a sleek business suit, her hair styled in a professional updo. As she applied a final touch of lipstick, she barely recognized the person staring back at her. Gone was the masculine agent who had walked into the facility weeks ago. In his place stood a confident, attractive woman ready to take on the world. Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She thought of Claire. She had more than just the mission to fight for now. She had a future to return to, a connection she wanted to explore. With one last glance in the mirror, Emma picked up her briefcase and headed for the door. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. Her transformation was complete, her new identity secure. It was time to step into the world and become Emma Taylor, to use her newfound skills and appearance to complete her mission and protect her country. As she walked out of the facility and into the bright morning sun, Emma felt a mix of excitement and resolve. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with dangers and uncertainties. But she was prepared. With her training, her new identity, Emma was ready to take on whatever the mission might bring. The city streets bustled with morning commuters as Emma made her way to the sleek office building that housed her cover job. She blended seamlessly into the crowd, just another young professional starting her day. As she entered the lobby, Emma took a moment to observe her surroundings, noting security cameras and potential escape routes, old habits that her training had ingrained deeply. "Good morning, Miss Taylor." The receptionist greeted her with a smile. "Ready for your first day?" Emma returned the smile, slipping effortlessly into her role. "Absolutely," she replied, her voice confident and feminine. "I'm excited to get started." As she was led through the office to her new workspace, Emma cataloged faces and names, building a mental map of the company's structure. Her real mission wouldn't begin for a few weeks. She needed time to establish her cover and gain the trust of her coworkers first. The days that followed fell into a routine. Emma threw herself into her work at the tech firm, impressing her superiors with her dedication and quick learning. She joined her coworkers for after-work drinks, carefully building relationships and gathering information. All the while, she remained vigilant, watching for any signs of the criminal activity she'd been sent to uncover. It was during one of these after-work gatherings that Emma first made contact with her target. Marcus Reeves, a charismatic executive rumored to have connections to the organization selling state secrets, approached her at the bar. "You must be Emma," he said, flashing a charming smile.
"I've heard good things about you from the team."
Emma felt her pulse quicken, but kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Reeves," she acknowledged with a polite nod. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm loving my time with the company so far." They fell into easy conversation, Emma carefully steering the topic towards work projects and company dynamics. As they talked, she could feel Marcus appraising her, his interest evident in his body language. It was exactly the opening she needed. Over the next few weeks, Emma cultivated a friendship with Marcus, always maintaining a professional demeanor but allowing just enough flirtation to keep him intrigued. She attended company events, making sure to cross paths with him and his inner circle. Slowly but surely, she began to gather snippets of information, piecing together the puzzle of the criminal operation. But as Emma delved deeper into her mission, she found herself grappling with unexpected emotional challenges. Living full-time as a woman, she experienced the world in ways she never had before. There were moments when Emma found herself missing aspects of her old life, the simplicity of moving through the world as a man. But there were also surprising joys in her new identity. The camaraderie she found with female colleagues, the freedom to express emotions more openly, the pleasure of feeling beautiful and confident in her own skin. Through it all, Emma's thoughts often drifted to Claire. Emma found herself looking forward to the day when she could return to Claire, to explore the potential of their relationship without the constraints of her mission. As weeks turned into months, Emma's patience and hard work began to pay off. She was invited to increasingly exclusive gatherings, privy to conversations that hinted at the true nature of Marcus's extracurricular activities. But with each new piece of information came greater danger. Emma knew she was walking a razor's edge, one misstep away from having her cover blown. The turning point came at a lavish charity gala hosted by the company. Emma, dressed in a stunning evening gown that accentuated her feminine curves, circulated through the crowd, her senses on high alert. She overheard a hushed conversation between Marcus and an unknown man, catching phrases that confirmed her suspicions about the sale of classified information. Heart-pounding, Emma excused herself and made her way to a quiet corner, pretending to take a phone call. In reality, she was activating the emergency contact protocol, alerting her handlers to the critical information she'd uncovered. But as she ended the call, Emma felt a presence behind her. She turned to find Marcus standing there, his expression unreadable. "Enjoying the party, Emma?" he asked, his tone casual but with an undercurrent of suspicion. Emma forced a smile, every nerve in her body on high alert. "It's lovely," she replied smoothly, though I needed a moment of quiet. These events can be a bit overwhelming. Marcus nodded, stepping closer.
"You know, Emma, I've been watching you. You're not quite what you seem, are you?"
For a heart-stopping moment, Emma thought her cover had been blown.
But then Marcus continued, his voice lowering seductively. "You're far too intelligent, too ambitious for the role you're in," he said. "I think you'd be perfect for a special project I'm working on. Something that could be very lucrative for someone with your talents." Emma realized with a mix of relief and excitement that Marcus was attempting to recruit her into his illegal operations. This was the opening she'd been waiting for. "I'm intrigued," she said, allowing a hint of eagerness to color her tone. "What kind of project did you have in mind?" As Marcus began to outline the basics of his offer, Emma listened intently, her mind racing. This was it, the evidence she needed to bring down the entire operation. But she knew the most dangerous part of her mission was still to come. She'd have to gather concrete proof, possibly infiltrate deeper into the criminal organization, all while maintaining her cover. The gala continued around them, a glittering facade hiding the high-stakes game being played in its midst. Emma felt the weight of her mission pressing down on her, the lives and secrets at stake. But she also felt a surge of confidence. She had come this far, transformed herself so completely. She would see this through to the end. As she left the gala that night, Emma's thoughts turned once again to Claire. She allowed herself a moment to imagine their reunion, the joy of completing her mission and returning to explore the connection they'd begun to forge. It was this thought, this promise of a future beyond the danger and deception, that steeled Emma's resolve for the challenges ahead. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of gathering intelligence and staying one step ahead of suspicion. Emma carefully balanced her growing involvement in Marcus's illegal activities with her need to report back to her handlers. Each piece of information she uncovered brought her closer to completing her mission, but also increased the risk of exposure. One evening, as Emma was preparing to leave the office, Marcus approached her desk. "Emma, I need you to join me for a meeting tonight," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "It's important." Emma's instincts flared. This was unusual. Marcus had never invited her to an after-hours meeting before. Could this be the break she'd been waiting for? "Of course," she replied smoothly, hiding her apprehension behind a professional smile. "I'll just grab my things." As they drove to an unknown location, Emma's mind raced through possible scenarios. She discreetly activated the tracking device hidden in her watch, alerting her handlers to her movement. Whatever was about to happen, she wanted backup nearby. The car pulled up to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Emma's heart pounded as she followed Marcus inside, her senses on high alert. The interior was dimly lit, and she could make out several figures waiting in the shadows. "Gentlemen," Marcus announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I'd like you to meet Emma Taylor. She's the newest addition to our team." As Emma's eyes adjusted to the dim light, she realized she was standing before the key players of the criminal organization she'd been sent to infiltrate. This was it, the heart of the operation. She forced herself to remain calm, to play her part perfectly. One wrong move now could be fatal. The meeting that followed was tense, filled with coded language and veiled threats. Emma absorbed every detail, committing names and faces to memory. She participated when called upon, offering insights that showcased her value while carefully avoiding any missteps that might reveal her true identity. As the meeting drew to a close, Emma felt a mix of triumph and terror. She had just witnessed enough to bring down the entire organization, but she also knew that she was now in more danger than ever before. Just as she thought they were about to leave, one of the men, a gruff, scarred individual introduced only as the Colonel, fixed Emma with a penetrating stare. "Miss Taylor," he said, his voice gravelly. "You've impressed Marcus, and that's not easy to do, but I have to wonder, how did a simple tech worker end up here?" Emma felt a chill run down her spine, but kept her expression neutral. "I've always been ambitious," she replied, injecting her voice with just the right amount of eagerness and naivety. "When I realized there were opportunities beyond my official job description, I knew I had to seize them."
The colonel continued to study her for a long moment before nodding slowly.
Ambition can be a dangerous thing, Miss Taylor. Make sure it doesn't lead you astray.
As they left the warehouse, Emma could feel Marcus's eyes on her. She knew she'd passed a test, but at what cost? The stakes had just risen exponentially. Back in her apartment that night, Emma's hands shook as she encrypted and transmitted the details of the meeting to her handlers. She knew that the endgame was approaching rapidly. The agency would move soon, armed with the information she'd provided. As she prepared for bed, exhausted but wired with adrenaline, Emma caught sight of herself in the mirror. The face that looked back at her was familiar now, but in that moment, she felt the full weight of her transformation. She had become Emma Taylor so completely that sometimes her old self felt like a distant memory. Lying in bed, unable to sleep, Emma's thoughts turned to Claire. She allowed herself to imagine their reunion, the joy and relief of completing her mission and returning to explore the connection they'd begun to forge. It was this thought, this promise of a future beyond the danger and deception, that finally allowed Emma to drift into an uneasy sleep. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and anticipation. Emma continued her work at the tech firm, hyper-aware of every glance, every conversation. She knew the raid on the criminal organization was imminent, but she had no way of knowing exactly when it would happen. It was a Wednesday afternoon when everything finally came to a head. Emma was in a meeting with Marcus and several other executives when the doors burst open. Armed agents flooded the room, shouting orders and brandishing weapons. In the chaos that followed, Emma played her part to perfection. She acted shocked and terrified, allowing herself to be herded out of the building with the other employees. As she emerged onto the street, she caught sight of her handlers watching from an unmarked van. A slight nod from one of them confirmed that her part in the operation was over. The debriefing process took days. Emma recounted every detail of her undercover work, providing crucial information that would ensure the criminal organization was dismantled completely. As she spoke, she felt a strange mix of pride in her accomplishments and a lingering sense of disconnection from her old self. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of questioning and paperwork, Emma was released. She stood outside the agency building, feeling oddly lost. For months, she had lived and breathed her undercover identity. Now, with the mission complete, she faced an uncertain future. As she pondered her next move, a familiar voice called out to her. "Emma?" She turned to see Claire standing there, her green eyes bright with emotion. Without hesitation, Emma rushed into her arms, feeling tears spring to her eyes as they embraced. "You came back," Claire whispered, holding her tightly. "I promised I would," Emma replied, her voice thick with emotion. As they stood there, reunited at last, Emma felt a sense of peace wash over her. The mission was over, her duty fulfilled. But the journey she had begun, the transformation that had changed her inside and out, was far from finished. With Claire by her side, Emma was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. She had discovered strength and resilience she never knew she possessed, had experienced the world from an entirely new perspective. Whatever the future held, she would face it as Emma, the person she had become, the identity she had grown into, the self she had discovered through her incredible journey. As they walked away from the agency building hand in hand, Emma felt a surge of excitement for the life that lay ahead. Her transformation had begun as a mission, but it had become so much more. It had become her truth, her reality, and now, with Claire, it promised to be her future. The sun was setting as Emma and Claire made their way through the city streets, their fingers intertwined. They walked in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the journey that had brought them to this moment. Finally, they arrived at a small cafe, the same one where they had shared countless conversations during Emma's recovery and training. It felt fitting to return here now, at the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. As they settled into a quiet corner booth, Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything she'd been through wash over her. "I can hardly believe it's over," she said softly, meeting Claire's gaze across the table. Claire reached out, taking Emma's hand in hers. "How are you feeling? Really?" Emma paused, considering the question. "Relieved," she said after a moment. "Proud of what I accomplished, but also a little lost. I've been Emma Taylor for so long now, I'm not sure who I am without the mission." Claire nodded understandingly. "That's natural. You've been through an incredible transformation, and not just physically. It's going to take time to figure out what comes next." As they talked, sipping their coffee and sharing a slice of cake, Emma found herself opening up about the complexities of her experience. She spoke of the challenges she'd faced living as a woman, the unexpected joys she'd discovered, and the way her perspective on the world had shifted. "I don't think I can go back to who I was before," Emma admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Even if I stopped the hormone treatments, even if I had more surgeries, I'm not sure I want to be that person anymore." Claire squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You don't have to make any decisions right now. You have time to explore who you are, who you want to be." As the evening wore on, their conversation shifted to lighter topics. They laughed about shared memories from Emma's training, caught up on what Claire had been doing during the months of the mission, and tentatively began to discuss their hopes for the future. When they finally left the cafe, the city was alive with nightlife. Emma felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in months, no longer constrained by the need to maintain her cover or complete her mission. "What now?" Claire asked as they stood on the sidewalk, the warm summer night enveloping them. Emma smiled, feeling a surge of excitement for the unknown path ahead. "I'm not sure," she admitted, "but I know I want you to be part of it. If that's what you want to." Claire's response was to pull Emma close, hugging her softly under the glow of a streetlight. When they parted, both women were smiling, their eyes shining with promise. "I think that's a perfect place to start," Claire said. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.